I'm Robert, and today I'm going to show you how to take this image from here to here, all in Lightroom. Thank you to my friend Lupita for providing me with this amazing file to work with. She's a great photographer. Check her out on Instagram, link in the description below. If you would like your image featured on this channel, get in contact with me on Instagram. This is going to be a fun edit. I'm going to try and use as many tools and tricks as possible. Let's get started working at the bottom how I usually do. Double check I'm on the current version. We're going to skip vignetting for now, but we might come back to it. Let's click on constrain crop. Let's double check that this image is straight. And it looks like it is. Moving up. I always check these two boxes, remove chromatic aberrations and enable profile corrections. We can see this image was shot on a Nikon 16-35 f4. Let's take a look at the settings real quick. 1.6 seconds, f11, ISO 100. Continue our way up to sharpening. We'll do my standard sharpening routine, 100 of sharpening and applying a mask. Hold down Alt so we can bring up our mask. Let's sharpen everywhere but the sky. Right about here looks good. Let's continue up. We're going to skip this section, but we will return. Now we're at the basic panel. Let's open this image up a bit. I'm going to bring the highlights down and the shadows up. Let's set our white point. Bring the whites up until they start to clip, then back them down. We'll do the same with the blacks. Bring it down, we're clipping, bring it back up. Now we have a better view of this image. Let's warm it up a little bit. Let's go down to luminance and get started with our base edit. Luminance is how bright or dark a color is. So let's darken up some of these colors we see in the sky. We'll bring red down, orange, yellow a little bit more, also purple and magenta. After luminance, I always go to saturation and boost up the same colors. So red, yellow, orange, purple, and magenta. Now that we have our base edit done, we can get into the fun part. I want to get started on the sky here. We have cool colors on the left and warm colors on the right. Let's grab a grad tool and pull it down. I want this mask to only affect this blue area of the sky. So we can go over here, range mask. Let's choose color. We're going to grab our eyedropper and click on somewhere that is blue. We can adjust it using the amount slider. So we'll put it at about 11. So now we're only going to be affecting these darker colored clouds. It's spilling over here a little bit. To get rid of that, just select a brush, hold down Alt to turn your brush into an eraser, and let's erase all of this area. We don't want to have any effect over here. So I'm going to press O to turn off our mask so we can see what we're doing. I want to make this area more blue. So we're going to bring the temperature down and the saturation up. So we have a nice opposing colors now. We have cool and warmth all in one image. I'm going to grab another graduated filter tool, pull it down over the sky while holding shift to make the line straight. Double click on effects to reset all of our tools. And let's bring the exposure down just a little bit. So now the sky's a bit darker. I'm going to grab one more graduated filter tool, put it at the top, pull down, double click to reset all of our sliders. And with this filter, I just want to darken the very top portion of the sky. So we have dark going down to light. Very subtly, we're just going to bring it down 0.1. So let's take a look at all of our graduated filter work. Here's before, and here's after. You can see the extra saturation in the blue here, and our graduation of dark to light. Next up, let's have some fun with the colors. Let's go down to split toning, click on highlights. So when we're working with split toning and highlights, we're only going to be working with the bright areas of the image. So you grab your eyedropper and you can drag it around anywhere in this area. Wherever the pointer's at is the color it's going to add into the highlight section of your image. So we can make it really red or green or weird colors. I'm just going to bring it up from the bottom and over towards red just a little bit. The higher you drag it up, the more intense the effect. And the lower, it's barely going to be affecting anything down here. So let's just bring it up a little bit, right about here. Close that. If you want to make some fine-tune adjustments, you can click on hue, bring it down, bring it up to fine-tune your color. Same with saturation. So if you have less saturation, it's not going to make any effect. And if you bring the saturation up, it has a major effect. So we'll do kind of a subtle change here. We can click here to turn on and off. So here's before, here's after. So basically we added a little more red into the sky. To balance all the red and warmth we put, let's put some cool colors into the shadows. So we have cool colors over here, blue leaning towards green. So I'm watching the foreground to see how it is affected. So if we bring it more over towards green, we have an intense green in the foreground. And if we bring it more towards blue, we get a lot of coolness. So I want it somewhere in between. Right about here looks good. So you can see both on highlights and shadows, we didn't go very high on the saturation, so it's only a mild effect. If you start bringing it up past 30 or 40%, you're going to get a very strong, probably a natural look. So we've worked on the sky. Now let's work on our foreground. I'm going to go back to luminance, saturation, and I'm going to punch up this green. Let's bring the saturation of the green up quite a bit, somewhere around here. Now let's continue working on our foreground. Let's grab our brush tool, press O for overlay, and let's brush in this entire foreground area. Make sure we have auto mask enabled to make it easy. If you spill over to an area that you don't want your mask to be applied to, just hold down Alt and it turns your brush into an eraser. Press O, let's turn off our overlay, and let's add some texture into our foreground. Let's darken it up just a little bit to make it look more saturated. That's a good starting point. Let's grab a new brush. The plants here are a bit brighter than everywhere else, and I kind of want them to match. So let's use a brush in this bright area. We're going to darken it a little bit. So we'll bring it down 0.2 of a stop to get it to match the tone of all the other ones. Now let's go and grab our radial filter tool. I really like these succulents and cactus that are right here, so I'm going to highlight them a little bit. I'll grab my radial circle tool. You can see we have invert selected, which means everything inside the circle is going to be affected. If you didn't have this checked, everything outside of the circle would be what's being affected, but we want to work on the inside, so we'll click it. I'm going to bring the exposure up in this area so we can see it a little better, and I'm going to also bring up the saturation. So now this little area stands out from the rest. Let's go back to our brush tool, and I want to work on this walkway here, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Reset all my sliders here. Let's press O to turn on our overlay, and let's paint in this whole walkway. You can see we spilt over in some areas, so just hold down Alt, turns our brush into an eraser, and let's erase all of our mistakes. Again, we have auto mask on, so it makes everything pretty easy. One last spot here. So let's press O to turn off our mask. This walkway has a strong magenta shift to it, so we can bring that down a little bit by bringing the tint down and also the saturation to make it look a little more natural. Now to highlight it, let's bring the exposure up. And let's zoom out to see how this looks all together. That looks nice. The reason why I wanted to highlight this area is I want the viewer of this image to imagine themselves standing here and walking down this pathway onto the sand. And by bringing brightness to it, it brings attention to it. I'm going to continue working on this foreground. Go to hue, choose green, and let's adjust the shade of green. You can bring it down, makes everything more yellow, but I want to make everything more green, so I'm going to bring it up. We can bring it up too far, looks a little weird, so let's bring it down to about 25. So we can turn off all of our HSL work and see what it looks like before and after. Just a subtle change, which is exactly what I'm looking for. Now let's grab our spot removal tool and let's clean up the ocean over here. We got a lot of these little spots. So I'm going to remove all these little buoys that are out in the ocean. That looks cleaner now. Now let's scroll down and let's take a look at vignetting. Vignetting adds darkness to the corners of your image, which helps draw your eye into the center. We can adjust the midpoint, and since we have the amount selected to 100, we can see the effects easier. We can draw it in or draw it out. So I wanted to just have an effect on these very corner edges. So I'm going to leave it there at midpoint 75. So now that we've done that, we have a very hard edge, so we can increase the feather to soften it. We'll go to about here. Let me readjust our midpoint. So now we're only affecting the corners, and then it gradually sweeps in. So we'll reset our amount back to 0. Now we can adjust our amount. We'll just go -10. So it's just a slight darkening of the corners, but it helps draw your eye into the center of the frame. Now the last thing that we haven't touched is calibration. It's similar to hue, where we can affect certain colors in the sky. So I want to adjust the red a little bit. We can bring it up to make it more yellow, or we can bring it down to make it more red. Double click to reset it. So I'm just going to adjust the red slightly, bringing it down -5. We add a little bit more pink into the sky. We can also adjust the saturation. We can bring it up quite a bit to add a lot more pink. But I'm just going to add a slight amount. Now remember, with the split toning, we were affecting the highlight areas or the shadow areas. We can also adjust the tint of the shadow areas, more green or more magenta. Since we have a lot of green in our shadow areas, let's bring our shadows down a little bit. So this is too far, so let's just back it off. We'll just make a subtle adjustment of -10. Here's before. We have less pink in the sky, and our greens are a little more muted. After, it's a subtle change, but we have a little bit more pop in our greens and more pink in the sky. So let's take a look at everything we did. We increased our temperature. We opened up the image with the highlights and the shadows. We set our white point, which sets our exposure and our contrast. We did work in the HSL panel, darkening colors, saturating colors, and adjusting colors. We added a split tone to our highlights and shadows to make the highlights more red and the shadows more blue. We applied our standard sharpening with a mask. As always, we applied our Lightroom lens corrections. This image was level to start with, so we didn't need to rotate it. We applied a custom vignette to the edges, and we slightly adjusted our calibration of colors. We also used all the tools. We used the spot removal tools to get rid of all of those distractions from the ocean. We used our graduated tool 3 times to adjust the sky. We had our radial filter tool highlighting our plant down here, and we used the brush several times on the foreground and this walkway. You don't need to use all of these tricks to get similar results, but it was fun to give it a try. Once again, thanks to Lupita for submitting this image for me to work with. Check her out on Instagram. I hope you liked this video. Please like and subscribe. Thanks.